I never wanted to be a lizard, much less one that spits acid. I wanted to be a frog. Greetings everybody, it's old Hanker and Fernell back once again with Runehammer. Welcome back to the channel, and we are going to get into another pithy discussion today. We're going to talk about line of sight. Why are you going to use line of sight? And even what is it? You're going to use it to force players to move around. It is that simple. This is key mechanics. If you notice, you can't see my lovely front of my head, the part where the sound comes out. Can I get this blasted pillar out of my way, please? There we go. Key mechanics. There hasn't been a key mechanics video since pretty much the dawn of time. Stegosaurus says, and Diplodocus walked the earth. I finally realized there are two more key mechanics that I have left undiscussed. Even after all these years of being on YouTube, taking all this time between videos to do some deep thinking, walking amongst the woods, being amongst the trees and the mountain homes, I realized there are two remaining to talk about. And today we're going to talk about the first one, which is line of sight, and how it is going to be used to make your encounters so much freaking cooler than if you didn't use it. What's the big deal? Why is it a key mechanic? A lot of times when you're designing an encounter, and I'm not just talking about like combat. Remember, danger is what's going to make any kind of gameplay more exciting. And danger can take the form of combat, which is like danger you can actively work against, or it can take the form of environmental danger, which you can't destroy the whole world to get over a rickety bridge, right? So a rickety bridge would be an example of an encounter that doesn't involve combat, but it doesn't involve danger, and danger is going to be the crucible of moments that involve a lot of fellowship and role play and other things that I know you want in your game. When you're designing encounters, danger is your friend, all right? One of the ways that you can contain, define, or refine the danger in your encounters is by using line of sight. That was a drum roll. Terrible. Line of sight is one of the oldest, most tried and true components of game design and encounter design, all the way back to the very, very beginning. Line of sight could even be said to be used in the earliest game designs, both pen and paper, as well as digital games, which really took it to another level. Now, line of sight is also a huge part in real-world combat design. So if you go all the way down to The Art of War by Sun Tzu and read about how terrain can be used, and blockage and fire and smoke and weather, a huge part of overall battle tactics involves line of sight. And it comes all the way down then through the ages, through wargaming, war simulations, tabletop RPGs, video games. They all wind up here in our lap for us to use these highly developed concepts of line of sight used in game design. That's what we're going to be getting into. I'd like to break it down into a few categories. First of all, you've got positive and negative line of sight. I'd like to break it down into a few categories. First of all, you've got positive and negative line of sight. Positive and negative is the first thing I really wanted to talk about. Positive and negative means, in one case, what you're looking for in your players is to get into the line of sight. It's a giant glowing crystal, and it only heals you if you're looking right at it. But you're in this room with all these pillars. Okay, pillars are the classic whipping boy for line of sight. And so what you need to do is find a gap in them where it lines up and you can see the crystal, and then Negative line of sight is the simple opposite. The eye beast is up there shooting its anti-magic ray, and you need to get behind the pillar to not get blasted with it, because let's face it, anti-magic is a buzzkill for everybody. So that is a form of negative line of sight. Now, you are using positive and negative line of sight, remember, to move your characters around. Why is moving characters around so cool? Because it makes encounters much more exciting. We've all heard the term tank and spank. Tank and spank is a sort of pejorative or derogatory term that describes game design that causes actors or characters or monsters, any, active element to stick together. And once they stick together, to resolve their combat until one of them is gone and then move on. And then another one comes, they stick together again, almost like an RNA molecule. Once the combat is done, this guy's done. Now I can move again. This is what leads to things like attacks of opportunity, using an action to disengage, and other components you find in Pathfinder and D&D 5th edition that you will not find in some other games, because they want to promote loose combat rather than promote stickiness. And this is all just taste or preference in game design. So you have your positive and your negative line of sight. That's your starting point, right? And so in your encounter design, you can say, let's do a negative line of sight encounter. Okay, I'm going to put a blob of stone right here, and now I've got this lizard over here that can shoot this sort of straight line of acid spit. Pew! Now, you want the players to move from the doorway or the entrance, whatever, to the rock, the blob of rock as a piece of shelter, to deny line of sight to the attacker, the lizard, right? In that case, there's only one way to make this really stick, and this is a big part of the key mechanic that you're going to use with line of sight. You have to be absolutely freaking ruthless with whatever you're expecting players to hide from. Now, I don't know if you guys have ever seen this, but players do not hide from things, even when they are terribly dangerous. Players are just like, I can do anything. I'm a D&D character. Yeah. And they should feel that way. And so if you really do want them to need that shelter, that blob of rock, to avoid the acid spit from the lizard, that acid spit needs to be like dex save to dodge or instantly drop to 0 HP. It's got to be boom. It's got to be absolute in its danger level. Then players will consider, we probably need to get behind that blob of rock. But then it turns out the ground is shifting and broken between them and the blob of rock, and now you have an interesting encounter. They need to get to that shelter because of this acid spit is super deadly. And so you're going to move them. You're going to draw them, right? Just like in trap theory. But this time you're not drawing them with treasure or with a reward. You're drawing them with a line of sight shelter. Using line of sight doesn't always just have to be, here's a monster, and if you hide behind the blob of rock, the monster can't shoot you, right? That is its most rudimentary form. But as you start to get used to using line of sight in your encounter design, the benefit of it is so great because it gives you a final solution to the arbitrary geometry problem. This is one of my own little buzzwords for basically describing the oddity of a lot of D&D encounter maps, where they have squiggly walls and these sort of zigzaggy doorways and corridors that make no sense, and I think just eat up a bunch of time at the table. They look really cool in a map, because when you're just looking at the map as a spectator, you're like, ooh, look at all that cool little stuff in there. It's very thoroughly created. But when it comes to actually using it as a functional encounter space, you find yourself battling all this arbitrary geometry. Now, once you start getting line of sight in your tool bag, you realize that designing a map is all an exercise in line of sight. If you go back to another video I did called Architectural Unities, it describes some of the architecture or environmental design components used in designing spaces. And this is where line of sight now comes all the way back home to roost. It gives you a means to draw a dungeon that begins as just a straight space. This is just a blob of space. Why do I need a bend? Why do I need this? Why do I need this obelisk in the middle? And asking why do I need, I think, is a great place to begin the wheels turning when it comes to game design. If you're a dungeon master, a game master, like me, let's face it, you're a game designer. So you're not going to just be sort of reading this and presenting that. You're designing gameplay. And in so doing, the map is going to be the superstar. Last night, we kind of came up with, I feel like, a brand new phrase that I love these days, which is the map speaks, right? This is when you're playing and the map, a little piece is revealed, or the map is the main character for a moment. And with really good line of sight designed into your encounters, not just gimmicky line of sight, hide behind the blob because lizard spit, but a general use of line of sight, how you can use a bend in a corridor to reveal what's at the far end rather than a straight one. That's a really fundamental technique to use. As you are doing this game design task and you're asking yourself, what do I need? Line of sight is a huge mechanic to take into consideration, especially when you bring it in with all the other key mechanics like perception and time and environment and threat. bring these things together, and then exactly how they're revealed and how they can be obscured, and that is the value of line of sight. But don't get overwhelmed and pepper your dungeons with pillars just because line of sight is now exciting. I think the thing you want to do is let's bring it all the way back to the lizard spit. Create yourself a threat which is terribly, undeniably potent. This can be a monster, a thing you can battle, or something environment which you simply need to survive or get through. Either way, this danger contains your players. The safety or denial of line of sight becomes the draw. We're right back in trap theory again. And then the springing of this trap is when they go for it. They run across the rickety bridge. They cross the area that the lizard is spitting, trying to kill prey, to hide behind the blob of rock, etc., etc., etc. The thing happens. Line of sight is a great way to get started to build spatial encounters that keep players moving. Now, it doesn't mean do it with every single encounter you do, but it's a great toolbox, especially if you notice that you're getting a tank and spank style behavior in some of your encounters. There's a monster, the players come up, they stick to it, combat, 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 dead. So see, nothing happened there. There was no motion at all. Now to me, if you take this as my monster and this as my player group, I like a combat to go like this. And then in between these two things, in this little finger space I've created, there's a pit, there's a rickety bridge, there's a rotating gear thing, and then there's these huge hammers coming down from above because it's a dwarven forge. Of course it's a dwarven forge. And people are moving around like this. And I'm using all these threats and components to make everything interesting. Does it always have to be interesting? No. But interesting is very fun and very cool. I hope this video helped you to begin to get line of sight into your games. Good day, Father. Good day. Father? Father? I don't want to be a lizard.